5 weeks.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andrew Cohen. I teach here at Georgia State University's Philosophy Department, and I'm also the director of the Jean Baer Blumenfeld Center for Ethics. We're very excited and we're delighted to have with us today some distinguished panelists as part of an event that is in the week leading up to our celebration of Veterans Day. Thank you for your service. That's a common saying that people say, and they hear it, when they're in the presence of those who have served our country. It's easy, and yet many people who have served bristle at it. The people who say it, they mean well. They mean to recognize the people who served our country, and they mean to recognize that they did something on their behalves. But many people who serve our country sometimes worry that the people who say these things, the people who say, thank you for your service, don't fully appreciate what they're thanking service members for. Sometimes the people who mean well might not fully appreciate the burdens that our veterans carry with them after they serve our country. These burdens are many. They can range from grief over the loss of other warriors, guilt or shame for what they may have seen or done, and other invisible wounds. But life after combat is not simply grappling with grief and heartache and the suicide numbers that many of us are familiar with. There are many great stories of resilience and virtue and honor, and we can acknowledge those while acknowledging the burdens. We're very grateful and honored to have with us today several experts, including some distinguished veterans, and they will help us, excuse me, they will help us in a discussion about the toll of war. Our featured speaker is Mr. Nick Irving. Mr. Irving has many firsts to his credit, and he served our country in many capacities, ranging from demolitions assaulters to master sniper. He served 6 years in Army Special Ops 3rd Ranger Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, and he writes about his training, some of what he saw, the men he served with, and some of their work together in his book, The Reaper. Part a copy of that, perhaps to Nick's embarrassment, right in front of him on the table. Today we're honored to have Mr. Irving visit with us and talk about some of his experiences, including some of the challenges of coming home after service. After he speaks, we'll have comments from our panel of experts, Mark Eister of GSU, Sue VerHoef of the Atlanta History Center, and Rich Williams of the U.S. Vietnam War Commemoration Office. You can read about each of them in the brochure that we've distributed. Before I turn this over to Nick, let me also mention another event this evening, which is advertised on the back of our brochure. Mr. Irving and Mark Eister will also appear as panelists for a screening of the movie Almost Sunrise. That's at 7 p.m. tonight in Cinefest, which is Student Center West, room 262. And that's free at 7 p.m. It's a really neat documentary talking about some veterans and how they dealt with the burdens that they carried with them when they came home. We'll have an excellent panel discussion afterwards. So with that, please join me in welcoming Mr. Nicholas Irving.
Much appreciated. Yeah, so a little bit about my story. I've always wanted to be a sniper ever since the 6th grade. I remember making my first ghillie suit, and my mom would come outside and she'd put leaves on top of me while I sit out and just, sit in the yard and wait for kids to come by, and I'd pop up and scare them. And then it became a little bit of I guess an obsession where I would go to school and rub my eyes really, really bad until they turned bright red, and go to the the doctor's office or the nurse's office and say I have the flu, I'm really sick, so my dad could come pick me up just so I can go home and put on my ghillie suit and wait by the bushes by the bus stop and scare the kids when they got off the bus, or occasionally use my BB gun, but I don't think you can do that now. But things get a little weird. But yeah, it's something I've always wanted to do, and initially I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, like, pretty much like everybody else, and that's all you hear about, Navy SEALs and Navy SEALs. So I took that route, and I wasn't the brightest kid in school. It was graduated high school with a 1.7. And it wasn't because I was, I'm not going to say, I just didn't apply myself, I didn't really, it wasn't something that really appealed to me. So tried out for the whole SEAL thing, and I have this medical condition that's really, really rare. Not rare, but you're not allowed to be in the infantry. Hold a gun, shoot a gun, go to war and stuff like that. I'm colorblind, really bad. So I had to cheat my test, basically, and I studied every single easy horror test there was to, pass this color vision test, and, photographic memorizing, all these tests. And I get there, the nurse opens up this booklet, and there's not a single one of those, I guess, tests that I studied for. So she's like, you know what I'll do? I'll just trace my finger along these lines, and, you can pass this. 14 out of 14. I still have the original documentation where it's like 0 out of 14 to 14 out of 14 pass. Congratulations, what do you want to do in the Army? I was like, well, what's the closest thing you have to being a Navy SEAL? They're like, well, we have these things called the Rangers. They're like Navy SEALs, but they don't swim as much. It's like, sign me up, Went into the military and graduated 7 out of 85. So we had a class of around 85 guys, and over the course of getting beat down and punished and walking and staying up for weeks and weeks on end, 7 of us remained, and I was one of those proud 7 to go on to 3rd Ranger Battalion, and 6 months later I found myself in Iraq. And every 6 months we would deploy. So I would deploy for 4 months, come back, and stay at home for 6 months, and then repeat that cycle. Well, life started to, I guess, take a big change on my last deployment in 2009. Deployment was going really, really good, and there's this bad omen in our battalion. On your last deployment, you die. You get shot. And it was starting to look pretty true. It was at the height of the Iraq War, and before we went into this place called Marja, Helmand Province, before the Marines pushed in, we were doing some classified stuff out there, and basically, essentially what it was to kill every bad guy there was in, Helmand Province. So that was my job, my sniper team. We did pretty good. We did pretty good at, was referred to as the Angel of Death at one point, and then it became the Reaper. Not going to say I was proud of the name. It was, it was a job. I really didn't think too much about it, killing or anything like that. But over time, it started to take its toll on me. And on my last mission, my last operation, it's a 5-day operation. We were going out to capture a really important guy. On our way out there, it was like 4 days into it. Maybe 45 minutes of sleep the entire time. We're tracking this guy. We're tracking him, and we get close enough to where I think I may have a shot. It's like a little under a mile, or just over a mile. It's like, maybe I was a little bit too cocky. I think I got it, but it's 100% cockiness. I didn't have that shot. So we called in for our reinforcements to come in and help us capture this guy. Started off, like a normal operation, nighttime, land, and we start looking at these mountaintops, or not mountaintops. Have you ever seen like the movie Aladdin, where he's flying on the magic carpet? Have you ever seen that? Well, you're a guy, never mind. But now I'll watch it too, man. But yeah, flying around on this magic carpet, and that's like the imagery I remember from this night. Then things started to, I guess, take a turn for the worse when the sun started to rise. I hate operating, just like any special operations guy. We hate operating in the daytime. So as the sun starts to rise, we're walking in this open field, like a few football fields wide, a few football fields long, and I walk over this small little 4-foot hole, maybe 2 feet deep, and there's 6 of us on a reconnaissance sniper team. And I look at this hole and I say, you know what, man, I got a bad vibe. Maybe we should keep an eye on this hole, keep an eye out on this hole in case something happens. Okay, we kind of ignored it, moved on. Then the people started to come outside and congregate and started to, gather in the masses, and I'm like, man, I just got this really, really bad, eerie vibe, like the back of your hair, they're starting to stand up. And I look at my team leader, and I'm like, hey, man, I think we should get down. And he's like, yeah, I think we should too. 30 seconds later, it was like someone took a big lawnmower and started mowing down the grass. It was, we were surrounded by over 300, 400 guys, and you name what, you name a gun in Afghanistan, they had it. And we fall back to this 4-foot hole. I dive in first, a few of the other guys dive in who could fit. Two guys were out, they were just laying on the ground, and we happened to wander into this backyard of a guy named the Chechen. It was his nickname. He had fought with the Soviets, he was a mercenary. Really, really good sniper. So while we're in this hole, I'm starting to think, like, man, this is really, really hectic. I've been in, a few thousand or a couple thousand firefights over the course of my time, but this one was totally different, to where I felt this was it. This was the bad omen. I'm not going home. I really, I didn't care too much about the dying aspect of it. I accepted that, but it was more or less the fact that I didn't live life, man. I was 23 years old, and I got a mom at home that I'm a mama's boy, and I'm pretty sure she's gonna cry about this, But so long story short, in that little hole, I'm playing volleyball with bullets with this sniper, and we're picking off guys from me to that wall and a little bit closer than that. As they start to get a little bit closer in onto our position, my team leader, he pulls out a grenade, and he's like, "Dude, let's just eat this thing. We're gonna pull the pin, dive on it, kill ourselves." I was like, I was, pretty cool with that. I didn't want my mom to see what happens on CNN if you become captured, and we weren't allowed to get captured because of the information we had on us at the time. So as we're about to pull this pin on the grenade, best friend of mine, Benjamin Kopp, comes in. Well, before that, we had this B-2 bomber fly over. I thought I was already dead because this B-2 is like flat, looks like a UFO. And I'm a big space guy, so I thought that, well, I'm somewhere because that's a UFO, and I'm pretty sure that, this is ET coming to phone home and get me to come back or whatever. But not the case. They were trying to scare the enemy away, and that didn't work. He dropped some flares, and behind that was best friend Benjamin Kopp, and he had a few guys with him to come get us out. So I see, it looked like the cartoon The Roadrunner, where the dust is kicking up on the feet behind these guys as they run in. He slides in, and he starts putting down some fire, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty neat. Pop Smoke, who's really, really good. We have a few bullet holes in our clothes from, just things that happen in war. We fall back, and we get back to Ben Kopp, and he had a bottle of water, and I hadn't drank water in so long it felt like I was drinking cotton for, about 4 or 5 days. Chug half of it, give the rest to my spotter. Then I pick up and lead us out, and 5 minutes after that, we find ourselves in this really, really crazy ambush where the enemy popped out of the ground, and from 25 feet away, they started engaging us. And there's this big embankment, or a small embankment, off to the left of me and on the right of me at that point. And somersault over into this chest-high ravine full of water, and my team did as well. We're laying down suppressive fire, and I'm, looking through my scope, and I can see just heads popping up, just like whack-a-mole or something like that. And I started engaging those targets, and then I hear this ruler smacking a pillow. Hit it twice. I was like, what the heck is that noise? And I look over, and I just see Ben Kopp, the guy who just saved me. His leg is up on the embankment, and there's a 20-foot arterial spray of blood landing onto the embankment and getting inside the water. He goes down, and then the water starts to fill up with his blood. It gets this murky brown. I remember tasting pennies. I black out a little bit just from the pure shock. I was like, man, this is not the place I want to be. I don't want to die here, I thought I had more life to live than that. And then it was just, it got to the point where it got a little bit more hectic, and I turned to my my PL and my platoon leader, and I'm like, hey, we have to get 300 yards to this safe haven, this safe house, and we'll be good to go. We can fight from there. And as I'm talking to him, I felt water splash up, and it's really, really warm this time, and then he gets extremely heavy. At the time, I was a pretty strong guy, and I was like, man, this guy's, he's about 400 pounds, and he sinks down, and I look at him, and he's got this big gaping hole in his chest. So my spotter comes over, he puts his hand inside of his wound, and another sniper I had with me, he got shot in his foot. So we're having to, crazy medic, awesome guy, he comes over and he throws off his medical pack and is floating in the water. It's one of the weirdest things I remember seeing that day was his medical pack floating in the water, and he's doing like essentially surgery on this guy, trying to stop a wound, and we're packing this guy tight, and we applied 2 tourniquets, and they wouldn't, his artery had snapped up into his pelvis, and that was hard to get. So you see guys reaching all the way, wrist deep into his leg, trying to get this artery to pinch off, and I was like, no, we have to go now. I volunteered to take up the rear because at that point in time I had totally given up on life. I was like, you know what? If anybody's going to die, I want it to be me next. So I debated standing up at one point and just, taking that. But then I was like, I don't know if that's going to hurt or if it's not going to hurt. So I'll just pop up my hand and maybe I'll get lucky and fly home and get out of this, this situation. But then I thought that if the bullet goes in my hand and then goes through my arm, who knows? So scratched that whole plan. I was like, well, screw it. I'm just going to line up in the back and help these guys get out while we drag the wounded out. And I remember dragging Ben Kopp out, and we're getting ambushed, and the bullets are snapping overhead. And every time when we would hit a portion of the embankment where there wasn't enough cover supplied, we would have to tell Kopp, hey, dude, hold your breath, we're going under. So we'd go under, we swim with him for a little bit, come up, and then have to resuscitate him because he's, passed out and drowned. And we did this over the course of about 30 minutes, back and forth doing that. And, I'm picking off a few guys, and we finally get to this safe haven. Get up on top of the rooftop, and I remember going in on that mission with 210 rounds, and I left with around 6. I thought, the day's over. It's, broad daylight. Now it's time to leave. We're going to get some extraction, get out of here. Long story after that, a few more firefights ensued, and I had to lead out my entire unit over the course of almost a mile of open terrain, and enemy are surrounded, and I'm running the fastest I ever ran a sprint, like, Usain Bolt or whatever. I think I would have beat him that day. My feet never touched the ground. It was a dead sprint for a mile, and engaging targets on the way there. And we get there, and they didn't have enough vehicles for us, so we're piled up. I have a 300-pound Marine who's standing on my chest. He's a 50 cal gunner, and my head's on Lyons. This guy named Nathan Lyons my head's on his lap, and my body's laid across another guy's lap. I have no idea who it was, and all I wanted at the time was a cigarette. And I was like, I need something, man. This is a crazy day, And then that's when things really, really got worse. I got the cigarette, and I smoked it, went to go flick it out, and as I flick it out, cigarette comes back in, lands in my shirt, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm freaking out, burning up a little bit, and everyone thinks I'm hit. So like, Irv's hit. I'm like, no, man, just give me some water. So they're trying to give me water and like calm me down. I'm like, no, dude, I'm hot, right? I'm burning up. So that was probably the worst part of that whole day, I think. No, but that day it scarred me for a long time after that. I was asked to. And I guess not the funny part, but the sad part about the story, that, the guys who died, they were, about to go home like 2 weeks before that mission. That was, their last mission before going home. Ben Kopp gets hit, and he survived. He lived for, 6 days until he made it back home to go see his family, and then he finally, gave up. I'm not going to say gave up, but it just wasn't, it was his time to go. So that really scarred me pretty deep, and I got back home and I decided, I was never going to step foot overseas again, and I was done. Well, then found myself about a month later after I got out the military doing some stuff, private military contracting for the government back in Iraq, and came back home after that deployment. I won't talk too much about that one, but it was, I sat up in bed on the day I had to fly back to go to Iraq, and I was like, you know what, I'm done. I'm not doing it. Had nothing, no goal, no future, nothing. I was just like, I'm done doing my job. I've seen too much, lived through too much, I'm done. And that lasted all for about a few months. And then my car was repoed, and electricity was turned off in my home, and I was about to get foreclosed. Actually, the foreclosure notice was on my home, and I was like, well, this is life. So what did I do? I wasn't used to that type of, I guess, situation I was in where I couldn't fight it. You get to that point of you're faced with a situation overseas, and I could fight against it. This one was something, totally different. So one night I found myself with a bottle of Jack Daniels and a Glock pistol on this back road behind my house, and I contemplated, and it's like, screw it, I'm gonna do it. I have nothing to live for. All my friends are dead. I got their names tattooed on my bodies, and I haven't done enough. So I pulled the trigger. Luckily, nothing happened. It didn't go off. So I was like, man. So I went inside and decided to do some cutting just to get that rush of that blood. It's not that I missed the sight of blood, but it was just that I felt that I could be more, I guess, in connection with the guys that I lost. I had seen so much of their blood that maybe if I spilled some of mine, I'd be, good to go. And that went on for the course of quite some time, and went in and out of rehab of just trying to not drink myself to a point to where I wasn't functional, but just to a point to where I could suppress some really, really bad memories, And I had no aspirations in life until one day I decided that, a lot of close calls, and I had a dream from a guy, not Benjamin Kopp, but Honorable Santiago, our father figure of our sniper section. He came to me in a dream, and he's like, dude, cut it out. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you drink way too much, man. And I was like, man, maybe you're right, I started to realize my self-worth after that point of just what I needed to get out. I think a lot of guys like us, we hold way too much on, too much stuff on the inside. We have this type A personality, and we don't like to talk about certain things. So I decided to talk about it over the course of a couple of years, writing a journal, and that journal turned into a book, and it got picked up on a crazy night in Vegas one night. Found myself in Vegas with nothing at home. Everything is gone. Electricity is was turned off, and I had this idea of, I saw a guy, he wrote a book. That's what it was. He had written a book, and I was like, I want to be like you, man. I was like, I'm going to give it a shot. He's like, you really want to give it a shot and write a book? I was like, yeah. He's like, I'll hook you up with a guy at St. Martin's Press. And it was on from there. But it taught me a lot of never giving up. I didn't give up in combat. I didn't give up in the the training and jumping out of planes and stuff like that. I've had parachutes not open up, and I didn't give up on trying to get that sucker to open back up. But luckily it did, and that's a whole nother story. But I never gave up on life, and I was not a quitter. So quitting to me is doing something that your heart really never wanted in the first place. So I didn't really want to kill myself. I didn't really want to give up on life. Life is what I wanted. That's what my heart really wanted. And it's just as if I ask anybody here a question in their mind, I started to look at life a little bit differently. If I asked, let's say you, for example, if I ask you something, or if you ask yourself something in your head, you don't have to say anything, so don't be shy or anything, but if you ask something in your head right now, do you hear anything? Or if you say something, ask yourself a question right now in your head. Okay, you heard it? You got it? But that's that's impossible that you heard anything, because there's no auditory anything for the vibrations to pick up on your eardrums and be deciphered, by your brain. But as much as I or anybody else here tells you that that's physically, scientifically impossible that you could hear something in your brain without, and it's probably your voice too, right? But you didn't speak. It's impossible. Well, I started to look at life a little bit like that regardless of what the outer circumstances are, whatever, someone else may tell me outside of, what I have going on, I know that voice is real, just like a goal or a future or something like that. There's nothing that, for me is impossible when you start looking at life like that. I can tell you that that's impossible, that you heard a voice in your head, but only you know that it's 100% real. And I think, goals in life should be looked at the same way. So I think that's where, I guess, my life started to change, when I found self-worth. And a lot of guys in my community kind of neglect that. It's always looking after the guy next to you, you're fighting and stuff like that. You never really have a chance to sit down and say, what am I worth? And figuring out that was one of the biggest and hardest battles of, my life. And just changing an entire way of lifestyle. You average 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day, and 95% being this exact same thought as the one yesterday. By definition, if you expect something different in life, that's insanity. You have to change something somewhere. And that change started with me, whether it was waking up and saying, today's not my day. I'm not going to die today. Today's my day to, be better or make a difference in something, or smile once. If you look at my pictures for the last 10 years, I never smiled, not one picture. And it was just that empty death look. But I changed that. I started to smile a little bit more. Then the smile, turned into a little bit more happiness on the inside. And then the happiness turned into, productivity and putting out books, self-published, 5 books, and then have another one after this one, and one coming out May 8th, or 2 more coming out. And it's just that, I'm not sure that's my goal in life too, right, or anything like that, but if it's to tell a story, I don't think that, my purpose in life, it shouldn't be answered by me. I think it becomes way more intriguing when it's answered by, the many, you guys, or when I'm long and gone. My purpose in life is, whatever I'm doing now and whatever I'm happy doing, whatever my heart tells me to do. I live for that, and what comes with it, basically what comes with it. So that's pretty much my story in a nutshell, and where I've been through and, came from. But I think that, getting better, of course, it starts with the individual, but being able to admit that someone has a problem, or if you see someone with a problem, veteran or something like that, don't be scared to talk to them. Most of us are willing to talk if you, approach. You just not used to it, not used to talking. I've been so long of, had one of the craziest kill records in my unit and never talked about it to anyone, my family or anything. But the day I started to talk about it and write it in a journal, things started to change for the better. And that never giving up, never quitting, and giving up on life. You're only here for, 75 years on average. Got to live it up some way. Why be a candle when you can be a bonfire, So, I think, pass it on.
Turn it over to the panel. We can start with Rich if you'd like, or
whoever. I think it might be good. Some of y'all must have questions for him, right? So why don't you ask questions first? Is that okay with you guys? Yeah. Is that okay with you, Sue? Yeah. Ask away. Don't be shy.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Georgia State so far?
Yeah.
It's big, man. This is my first time ever stepping foot on a college campus. A doorstep, steps, or anything. I'm terrified of college, I was told as a young kid that I was dumb or, not as smart, and I would get, you know, picked on after school and jumped every day. My entire high school career was just, you know, how much can Nick Irving take of getting beat up, you know? How many jumpings can I possibly take? Then I became an Army Ranger and sniper, and then that never happened again when I came back. But they're like, oh, that guy's good at something. But no, I love it, man. I think that it's extremely big, and I've been lost maybe twice now. So I'm really good at land nav. That's not out of my norm, out of my element. But I think it's good to be out of my element, you know, every once in a while. I think we don't step outside of our element enough, and you know, that one little change of something may spark something. Who knows? I might go for a bachelor's or something like that. I don't know. Who knows? Yeah. Oh, your arm looked like it was behind and behind. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for telling your story. Several of my family members that have went to Iraq, and they really don't talk about it as much.
Yeah.
But it's just very interesting, and just knowing to hear of the life that he lived for 4 years, coming back and forth. So
yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Appreciate it.
I have two questions. One, how did you actually get here to Georgia State? Who invited you and who found you and who brought you here?
Yeah.
And the second question is, what is the story that you want relayed to young people that are interested in going into the field of military service or following in the same footsteps? What are the
wow, that's a tough question.
That you want them to know?
Your first question, how did I get here? I could ask that question about my life in general. You know, it's almost like I'm never where I'm supposed to be or where I thought I wanted to be. You know, after I got out the military and did the book thing, then I got picked up. I was on a TV show or hosted a TV show with John Cena. No idea how I got there, you know? And then I was doing after that, I was at John Cena's house taking selfies in his house naked, just to send to him because it was what I do as a, funny guy. But I don't know how I got there either. And next I know I was on a movie, The Wall with John Cena. I guess John Cena's the purpose of all this thing. Maybe he got me here, I don't know. But did a movie with him and Aaron Taylor Johnson, and this book just 2 weeks ago got picked up by for a movie. Initially it was by the Weinstein Company, but then after this whole thing I decided that I wasn't, it was not I have a mom, so, if you do that to my mom, we have a problem. So yeah, I decided to just get out of that, and then 2 weeks ago, some guy who wrote, I can't give that out yet, but a really good writer said, hey, I want to pick your book up for a movie, and it's like, okay, cool. No idea how I got here. I think that the universe just has a funny way of working itself out. I think when you put out good energy comes back, We're nothing but magnets anyways, and, the law of attraction states that. And I started putting out, just positive energy, and my life started to change, and I started getting positive things back. So, that's how I ended up here. And of course, Andrew reached out. The universe touched GSU and was like, contact Nick. But, and then the second question, if somebody wanted to follow my footsteps, I get that a few times from kids, and that's a tough one. I think that I've seen one too many 18-year-old kids get shot, and not make it back. And I have one too many names tattooed on my bodies that never saw 25 or never tasted a beer legally, And I think that, I don't know. I get the sense of you want to serve a country and you want to serve your country and go out and fight, but be careful what you ask for is my best piece of advice. I asked for that same, asked for that same thing before I joined the military. I want to go to war, and what is it like? I never could get that answer. No one had ever been to a war like this before. But I wanted to go so bad, and once I got there, I realized that, it takes a piece of you, when you it takes a piece of your soul, yeah. Just be wary of that and be careful of what you ask for. I'm not going to say you want to go to combat. Everybody thinks the combat is a Super Bowl in a military career. And if you don't get a chance, so we had a conversation earlier today, and the whole thing about you serve so long in the military and you may or may not have a chance to go to Iraq or Afghanistan, you feel like your career is incomplete. Well, if you look at the book, Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, anybody ever read it? How many people have ever read this book? I'm going to do a little test. I'm going to show you why. None, right? But you've read Dr. Jekyll and Hyde. This book is almost 300 pages. Dr. Jekyll and Hyde's book is only like 53 or 63 pages long. One of the greatest books ever written. One of them is also the shortest. you know? So as far as being complete in the military and getting the chance to go out and serve that and be in the Super Bowl of the military, not everybody has to have the same exact book. You know, my book is different from Jekyll and Hyde's, and I'm probably never going to be on his level, you know, and mine's longer. His is, you know, so I don't know. I would just be careful what you ask for. And if that's something you really, really want to do, put your mind to it 110% and then some, and then don't quit. I'm not a big believer in, and when it comes to something like that, my footsteps of special operations, there's no such thing as quitting. You know, I've had broken legs and walked 12 miles. I don't believe in that. So just don't quit if you do really want to go. And when you do get there.
I would think too, Nick, most people don't realize that the majority of military people never see combat. You know, there's a whole spectrum of and it's a whole different perspective, of course. You know, I'm a retired Air Force guy. I never saw combat. I mean, I deployed a couple times for the war, but usually the Air Force guys are well protected, and you know, we're not out firefighting, and so it's a different perspective. So I think Nick's point is very well taken. You must have a passion for what you're going to do, and if you don't have a passion for it, why do it? And only 1% of the American population serves in the military. So you know, talk to someone. I would say talk to a number of people who have served and make sure you know exactly what you're getting into.
If it's combat, I don't know. I would definitely deter away from combat, though. I think that changes you for, your dreams are never the same after that, you know, and you pick up bad habits after to try to suppress it. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up. I study, I'm in sociology, I'm a PhD student in sociology, so I study groups of people and how they, you know, adjust to systems and all these other things as well. But a question for you, you just picked up on dreams, is that what is something that you haven't done that you're ready to do right now? One thing that you're, just something that's like, you know what, this, I've done a lot and so forth. I don't know even how old, I don't know how old you are.
18.
Yeah.
No, I just turned 30. Yeah.
Wow. Just one thing that you say, hey, I haven't done this. It's something.
It's college, yeah.
Because you jumped out of planes and parachutes haven't opened and you survived all that. But
college. I think I'm scared of college. Well, I don't think. I know I'm scared of college. You know, I'm scared of that failure. I've never failed anything, and you know, the failure aspect behind the whole college and the stress, and then I see all the kids that are running around. And it's like, got to be here, got to be there, and I'm already lost, so I'm out of the game. You know, it's just the fear of failing academically. I'm so used to doing stuff physically that using this up here to, I mean, I can write a book and I can, you know, talk to a Fortune 500 company about stocks and, you know, ETFs and how good they're performing in the market right now. But if you tell me to go to college, oh man, I'm scared. Yeah. But I want to do it though. I want to.
As you, my name is VerHoef. I'm a veteran also, and as you were telling the story, it was just so many things that was so common. And I remember the drinking.
Yeah.
The excessive thing. I mean, man, it's like a fifth of vodka a day with tall boys.
Yeah.
And then wake up at bottles and cans everywhere. And I wake up and say, damn, I'm still alive.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and I got to a point, I remember the taste of the M16 barrel in my mouth and the fluid. You know,
COP fluid. COP, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, that taste in my mouth and stuff, man. And my suicide attempts. And it's like, man, it's just so many parallel things. Because, you know, and really, I didn't want to die, man.
Yeah.
I just didn't know how to live.
Or maybe you wanted to live again or live more, you know? I think that
it was just impossible for me to do it. You know, because I tried in different ways and different areas. Marriage fell apart and everything else, man. And you said something that was so paramount, man, that I want you to understand, because I started going to college from this. I decided to follow my passion.
Yeah.
You know, and that's to be a counselor psychologist.
Wow.
And man, I was scared to school too. High school, 1.7 something. It's like I never should have got out.
Oh yeah.
But I realized I had so many issues. There was no way for me to focus. So to join the military, 17, overseas, security, police, Air Force, and then I got into the baddest stuff I was bad enough to be. So, you know, drinking, constant military, hey, drinking and fighting, that's what they taught us.
Yeah,
man. I can say the other things too. But, you know, that's just part of our group of people. We had that mindset. And man, I'm gonna tell you about the college thing though, was that I decided to take they had the CLEP exam. Oh dude, I took that test and I bummed out. It's like, man, I might as well just sign my name and walk out.
Yeah.
You know, so, but then I said something to myself. I said, you know what? Man, I gotta challenge this because this is what I want to do. And I had the same thought that I'm not smart enough, you know, and I had all those bad memories of how bad I did. But I said, you know what? I'm gonna stop telling myself that. You know, I'm going to do what these instructors, they're going to learn support class. I'm going to do what they tell me to do and do it that same tenacity that I had in the military because the thing that I did have, I wasn't a quitter. No matter how bad it was, I just wasn't going to quit. Dude, I was in class with kids that were smart. I thought they was better than me, you know. They had all the right answers.
Kind of how I feel right now in this room.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's like, oh man, I'm not going to be this good. But man, one thing that they couldn't do, they could not work me. So I spent hours of doing everything. I took the CLEP exam. When I took it the first time, it was a 47. After I passed the class with a B, some of them got an A. Dude, I got a 98.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
But that math, I failed math like 6 times. You know what I'm saying? But man, I went through it, and there were people I knew were smarter than me. But you know what, man, I didn't quit. I'm a senior now at Georgia State. I graduate next year.
Nice.
I plan to get my master's and all the way to my PhD. I'll be 60-something to get my PhD. But you know what?
That's young.
Well, glad somebody, you know. But, you know, but the thing is, man, I follow my passion. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
And that's what you're doing now. You're following your passion. Your passion will feed you. It will wake you up. It'll put you to bed. It'll put you around people, resources. So, man, if college is what you want to do, man, see, you got you got what it takes.
Oh, yeah.
And the military gave us that.
Yeah.
You know, all the discipline, all the things, stay focused. So, man, if you want to go to college, hey, I'm telling you, this is the best place to be.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
I think he had his hand up first.
Okay, yeah. I'm sorry.
You go first.
Go for
It
it.
was more a comment than a question.
No, go for it.
I was gonna say
You look familiar, man.
No, sorry, man, but I don't think we met. But I was gonna say you served in 75th. I served in 10th Mountain Division.
Yeah.
As a supply guy in the infantry unit. We had a bunch of guys in 75th in my unit.
They got kicked out?
Well, I don't know about that, but
They got kicked out.
They were easily the best leaders I've ever worked under. All the 75th guys.
Nice.
So I have tremendous respect for those guys.
Appreciate it.
When I first got to my unit, actually, my battalion commander later on became the commander of the 75th Ranger Regiment.
Wow.
His name is Paul LaCamera. I don't know if you knew him, but yeah, great guys, man. Always liked working with those guys because they were always squared away, on top of their game, just took it.
Because we got.
You can see the difference in leadership between them and the other infantry guys. So
We'd have to go to the wood line if we messed up and get beat up a little bit. So stop messing up. Thank you.
So, thank you again for sharing your story. My name is Patrice, and I work for the Emory Healthcare Veterans Program. I'm kind of wanting to ask you I'm a veteran outreach coordinator. I'm retired Air Force myself, just retired in March of this year. So what I am coming upon is I know that about the invisible wounds. My last deployment myself, I was a medic for CJ Soda. So so I'm very familiar with everything that you said. I witnessed it all. So I was hired to kind of spread the word about this program that I work for now, to bring in post 9/11 veterans who suffer from the invisible wounds of war. It's difficult.
Oh yeah.
You know that, I know that, especially when it comes down to certain MOSs, AFSCs. It's hard because some people just are like, the culture is not to talk about it.
Yeah.
And like, I'll handle it and medicate. What would be your advice to me as a way, because I've found certain ways into like the MST environment, but when it comes to PTSD, it's kind of harder, and it could be because I am a female, that could be one of the barriers, but I do have male counterparts. I just want to be able to take your expertise and find out, how do we touch those lives? Like, what could somebody have done? You know what I'm saying? Like, what avenues could they have done to like get in there? Because this is a free program, and we're not full.
Got it.
And so for me, it's like it hurts because there are people that have this need, and you got all these resources here available to serve you, and it's not like it's inpatient. So it's, because I know that's a stigma as well. So it's like, how do you reach the people?
Yeah.
What would you recommend?
For me, when I went to the VA, I had to get evaluated and talk to a psychiatrist and stuff like that. But I never wanted to be around a large group of people. Being around a large group of people made me feel different, you know? So I had it set up to where the counselor would come to me and I could work on my paperwork by myself, and then slowly, you know, but surely, you know, a couple more people would join in, and eventually it got to the point where I could be in a group environment. But starting off into that group environment, being around a bunch of guys that, you know, that type A, or even females for that matter, you're back in that environment when you're amongst your own. And that mindset kicks back into that type A personality. If I can't talk about it, I'm gonna look like this, or I can't tell my story because my story won't compare to, you know, Mr. Delta Force astronaut right there, you know? So it's like, that was one of the biggest things for me, was getting into a group environment and telling my story. And I think that the reach out one-on-one individually, it gives the person, or it gave me a better sense of, I guess, being appreciated, or someone really did care, because I started to believe that, you know, thank you for your service was only bumper sticker deep, you know? And I think that once I got a chance to actually sit down and with one individual, and you know, my counselor and stuff, she was a female, and it just brought back of a mom. You know, I think that I can, you know, guys can relate to having a mom, hopefully, that, you know, love them and stuff like that, that nurturing care. And it's hard to even disrespect a female as a male, you know, in my opinion. So I think that naturally opens me up and brings out that soft aspect, opposed to a guy, then I'm like, well, I have to be macho, because if I tell a story like this, then he's going to think this. That's what's playing in the back of my head, you know. I hope that helped.
No, it does.
Okay.
So you've been documenting some of the stories that veterans are telling, a little bit like what Nick has done.
I've been documenting notes on my pad as I've been listening to you speak here too. If you all don't mind me asking a question here, because that's really what I'd like to do. What I do at the History Center is I manage the Veterans History Project, which is a collection of oral history interviews. We interview veterans about their military experience. And at one point in your story, you mentioned that you had hit a point where you didn't know how to fight it. You knew how to fight it when you were in country and in uniform, but you didn't know how to fight. How did telling your story for a broader audience help?
It didn't initially start off that way. It was basically I needed to make money really quick, so I wrote. Had bills to pay and a car. I needed a car, but I started writing just self-publishing books under like pseudonyms and stuff like that. I wrote underneath a guy named Carlo Stefani. For like philosophy, and then I opened up a little bit more with precision rifle books and how to, you know, shoot and stuff like that. This came about after just a couple of years of consolidating just basically a journal, and I self-published that with the intent of, I knew my sales, and from previous publications I was like, no one's really going to read it, you know, and I wasn't feeling as naked as I would have, knowing that, oh, it's going to be a New York Times bestseller. So that would have scared me away from it. But putting it out there, knowing that maybe 3 or 4 people would have read it, it didn't bother me as much. But, you know, I just needed like $15.
Did the act of actually putting it down on paper make a difference? Did you feel any kind of catharsis?
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
I felt way better putting it down, because it wasn't like talking, where when you talk, you kind of, for me, when I talk, you may forget something, or you know, you only have 30 minutes to talk to someone about a problem, and you don't get a chance to say everything. Almost like in an argument, where you have an argument with someone, then you go home and you're like, oh, I would have wanted, you know, if I would have said that, you know, shut it down. But I think writing it really gave me a time to let things marinate, and I can go back and look at it, you know, and put down things in detail, greater detail. Was writing. Writing is, you know, people say, can you read people's minds? Like, have you read a book or an autobiography? Of course, or a poem, you can read someone's mind. And that comes through writing. So putting everything down on paper was 100%. And I could draw along with it too. And, you know, if I had an angry moment, you know, it was kind of cool to see, you know, tears on paper, or drawings and stuff. It was cool. It added more, you know, flavor. It added more, like, this is real. And it was kind of a way to, and you know, finally get whatever I had built up in and not crying for many years, you know, physically on paper, you know. And that was mentally, it was one of those things where, even if it was taking a blank notebook, what do you call those, the composition notebooks,
Right.
and if you just look at it and cry, it was like, it's on paper now. And close it up, seal it, get rid of it, you know. So that's where it started.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that.
You know, there's several writing programs for veterans, organizations that get veterans together to write their experiences, and a lot of them, it's a cathartic experience. When they write the first poem, or they write the first verse, or they write the first play, or the first book, or whatever, it's a very cathartic experience because they can release all of that anger and upset that they've had. So, or even art programs, that some veterans get into art programs, you know, to express what they had experienced. But there's a variety of ways of doing it. And the lady that asked the question about reaching out to veterans, it's tough. It's going to be really hard. I mean, you'll have a better experience than a lot of people because you're a veteran, so they'll listen to you. They won't trust a civilian, you know, practitioner for the most part, because how can they relate to somebody who didn't have the same experience as them? And it doesn't have to be combat experience, but just the veteran experience. You were going to...
Yeah, and before we get too far away from that topic, it's Latrice, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We actually have a partnership with you guys. I don't know if you know that, with Emory, but we've sent a number of veterans over to you, but you're exactly right, and Nick just said it better than I could ever say it. It's that one-on-one trust building. So we need to deepen our relationship, Georgia State's, with yours, our Military Outreach Center. We have staff and their veterans on every single campus, all 6 campuses and the online. Develop these relationships, just like we've heard from Nick today, and David and I have had a chance to talk with him. We've developed a relationship, and he's done that with other people, and it's helped him be able to communicate and tell his story. And once you do that, the veteran can tell their story to us, and then we say, okay, Jack or Jill, I'm going to have you call Latrice over at Emory. She could really help you now.
Yeah.
And that's where no pun intended, we get in the trenches at that point and really be able to solve problems. But it starts with relationship building.
My aunt's here.
Yes.
She can attest to me growing up shooting in the back in the country.
Yeah.
That's how to get real honest.
She taught me how to shoot in the country.
That's good. Speaking of shooting.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Rachel. I work for the student-run newspaper here, and we're doing a story about students that have been deployed and that come back and like readjust. So what can you say about that? Like having to, I guess, get yourself integrated into civilian life after being at war.
It doesn't even have to do with war, I think. I think it's just that whole, just being in the military in general. You're essentially brainwashed for, you know, the point leading up to your career, throughout your career, up until the point you get out. You're in this mindset of, you know, we have a very, you know, structured routine that we go through day-to-day basis, and it's a way of lifestyle. You're in this, you know, just a different mindset of, mine was kill or be killed, and getting out, they didn't really invest too much time or energy into the de-brainwashing phase of it. It was more or less just like, here's how you write a resume, good luck, send you on your way. And I didn't know how to, I guess, be around, you know, people who didn't, you know, I guess was in combat or in the military. I couldn't really relate to it. So I think the military needs to invest more time into the whole reintegration process of what it's like to be, not even, you're always a regular person. There was no difference between me and the person who never did what I did. I just had a long gun and a pretty good shot, you know, but I think that, I guess, getting back to the whole realization that we are civilians at the end of the day, if you kind of get what I'm saying. You serve time in the military, but after that military time is over, you get back to the, you know, regular day in, day out grind. Just, it's what you've always been in the beginning in the first place. Before you were in the military, people make it seem like they were born Navy SEALs and Army Rangers and stuff like that, and automatically went to combat. It's like we forget that, for me, the first 17 years of life was being a civilian, you know, and my stint in the military wasn't comparable to the time outside in comparison to, you know, 17 years opposed to 6 or 7 or 8. So I think just that reintegration of the de-brainwashing of like, hey man, you know, you're not this guy. We trained you to be this way, but here's who you really are. And finding who I really was the longest process. You know, for me, was finding who, you know, I was before I had the military. You know, 18 years old, I had killed my first guy and had this crazy dream about it, still dream about it to this day. And getting out into the regular world and still having this dream and being able to cope with different things. It was just it's almost like for me reading a book, right? Life's like a book. And imagine reading a book and your hand's stuck on chapter 5 and you keep flipping back to chapter 5 while you're reading the rest of the book. It's the most weirdest way to read a book ever. Just read it, get over it, chapters after chapter after chapter. A lot like the military for me. It's a chapter, it's there, it's closed, and move on to the next. What's the next one? The end's not there yet, so there's still more to be written. That's how I look at life. And yeah, hope that helped out. That's a tough question.
Can you raise your hand? Just ask the question. And David, raise your hand. Raise your hand. You do connect at the end because he deals with and help. He's the military student advocate for the Atlanta campus, so that's the bulk of our students. And he could definitely give you a lot of pointers because he talks to hundreds of veterans here on campus. And you get the inside scoop. Okay.
And just to give credit where credit is due, it was David's excellent suggestion that we invite Nick to campus.
Good job.
Yeah.
The universe contacted him.
I'm Eddie Namias. I'm in the philosophy department. First of all, let me say that I would be honored to have you in my class, and I think most professors here would be too.
I appreciate it. I'm a little bit scared now.
If you've got the same grit you have in the classroom that you had on the battlefield,
Yeah.
I'm sure you'd be great. If you're willing, I was hoping you might answer some questions about the politics of all this.
Yeah, yeah.
And whether or not, how you feel about having been sent to this war or any war, and maybe how you feel about whether the 1% figure we heard about earlier, and whether you think maybe we'd be better off if we had a more democratic military, had a draft perhaps.
Do we need a draft? No, I don't think so.
Well, or something such that more a wider swath of society has to take on these roles, or whether you think it's good the way it is. Anyway, anything you want to say about how you feel about having been sent to this war?
Yeah. Well, really quick, I guess, to point out the whole draft thing, I mean, like I said, quitting is ceasing the pursuit of a goal that your heart never really wanted in the first place. So if your intent's not to join the military and you get drafted, you're probably not going to fight as hard as a guy who grew up at my age wanting to do it their entire life, And that's that conflict that I think would be presented. As far as politics, I was under Bush and Obama, and now we have, of course, Trump. But I was there for the whole change in combat and the way the strategy was, where it went from a point in time, my first and second deployment and third deployment, we were allowed to really do our jobs. And I'm not going to necessarily not necessarily say do our jobs, but the freedom that we had and the rules of engagement were a little bit more relaxed. And then we started to realize, hey, this war is going on for quite some time. We need to close this thing out. I mean, we've watched on the news, war's over in Iraq, and next day we're back in Iraq fighting, and I closed out Iraq, as a contractor. I watched all the troops leave, and still over there now, special operations and different contractors of that, for that point. But that was under the command of, when we started to do that drawdown, and the big push into Marja was when Obama had wanted, essentially to end the campaign in Afghanistan. So my unit was tasked with killing everybody in this certain region. Every bad guy, not everybody, but no, that'd be bad. It's genocide. But which I believe is the only way to actually cure, terrorism would be genocide. I think we're fighting more of a mentality, a mindset at this point than anything else. Where there's no distinguishable, enemy on the battlefield. I could talk to one guy one day, and then the next day we're having a gunfight, and I'm like, dude, this guy is really good. He didn't act like this yesterday. He was selling fruits at the local market, and now he's got an AK, and he's, pop shots, and he's pretty good. So I think that being there for the change and with the politics, I think politics have to realize that there is no end to this war. In my opinion, and after being there and as many deployments, and I know guys who have 20 deployments, 14 deployments, and 75th Ranger Regiment is the only unit that's been, or minus the 160th, they've been continuously deployed since September of 2001. And every single day, 24/7, 365. There's never a day where Rangers are not in Iraq or Afghanistan, and we can be anywhere in the world in 18 hours. So, and that I think that says a lot to have fought a war for so long and see so little change. I went to Iraq and Afghanistan multiple times, and the only change that I can recall seeing was the electricity stayed on a little bit longer. The enemy still is there, the mindset still is there, but now it's to the point where a guy who I shot back in 2005, you know, his son had to witness that, and now his son is a somebody and a military-age fighting male, and I went back contracting, and I'm fighting his son now, but he's got a son, you know, and they have to watch that continuous, you know, cycle and belief system. It's just as the way I told, you know, I said to you that it's impossible you heard that voice in your head, but you know you heard it. The same thing with the global war on terrorism. Their belief system is so strong in what they believe in, you can't defeat it. It's impossible. So no matter, I think, whether politics or how many bombs or bullets we have, you can't defeat a mentality or a mindset. That'd be equivalent to almost saying, hey, let's go out and fight every single Christian and Muslim on the planet. You know, you can't defeat that because there's always going to be that belief system. You know, you can't kill a belief.
If I can make a comment about that too, I think it's a broader problem. We've been at war since 1955, the United States. We have been in armed conflict since 1955. We're in, I think, 23 nations in Africa. Niger was the latest where, you know, people died. So I think it's a broader philosophical problem in the United States that our go-to seems to be, well, let's just invade them, change the government, and everything will be fine. And I think we learned our lesson in Iraq that that doesn't
Causes
work.
more problems.
And the never-ending war in Afghanistan. I see it as a never-ending war.
Me too. Me too. Yeah.
So I became interested in your story for a different reason, not necessarily the war story aspect of this book. So I read your book and I really enjoyed it. And I learned that you were the first African-American sniper in your unit. And as a prior veteran myself, I think I'm proud to say that the race relations in the military are, I think, very different than what they're like outside of the military.
Big time.
And considering the current climate in our country, what can you say about how you feel after leaving the military and being a civilian?
Man, that's deep. I never really had an issue with the police growing up. You know, I heard stories and stuff like that. Never really had an issue with them. Of course, the military, it was a military police, so, you know, beat them up anyways, just go home. But, no, we never did that. But, I think when it comes to race, you know, I was never, like, discriminated against in the military. It was, hey, Irv, did you know you were the, like, dude, it was more or less like, hey, I think you're the first black guy, you know, to be a sniper. And I was like, yeah, me too. And there was like only 2 in the entire unit. And that's due to, of course, I don't think that, you know, being where I grew up and a lot of other people grew up that are, you know, of color, we don't have access to swimming pools or the beach necessarily, opposed to, you know, you look at a certain demographic of individuals who grew up on California or Virginia or something like that. So to pass a swim test to get to Ranger Battalion was like a whole new level of, you know, for black guys and minorities. So it was like we had 2 at that point. I was the only sniper. And no one ever made a big deal about it, you know? The guy who saved my life was a white guy. And the father figure of my sniper section who changed my life, you know, to this day when it comes to alcohol abuse and stuff like that was Hispanic, you know? There was no really, you know, there was no color there. It was more or less just like, dude, at the end of the day, you know, I've tasted this guy's blood. I've tasted Ben's blood, you know, a mouthful of it in a ravine in Afghanistan. And I didn't once taste a white guy or a black guy or a Hispanic guy. I just tasted pennies. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I looked at it in the military. But getting out, I've had an encounter, a negative encounter with the police. You know, it was a night in New Orleans, partially because it's New Orleans and I was drunk, you know, and belligerent, and probably should have kept my mouth shut. But the whole reason why I started off was because of the way I looked and what I was wearing. You know, I think that, you know, they were used to seeing, and the cop actually hit me up on Facebook to have a discussion about it, but they're used to, yeah, well, they found out who I was, and they were like, oh, crap, you know. But started off, I was just, I'm not going to say wrong place, wrong time. It was the crowd I was hanging around, you know, generally, you know, all white crowd or predominantly white, and maybe a few Hispanic guys in there, and you see me there, and it's just like, maybe I was maybe singing a little bit too loud, or I don't know. But they confronted me, and things got, you know, I guess escalated a little bit too quick. And me being who I am, having this mindset of like, okay, there's 2 cops here, and I'm pretty sure I could take that guy's gun and do this and X, Y, and Z, and maybe get away with it. potentially. That was my mindset. And then I found myself in a jail for like a night. But it wasn't bad. It was more or less, like, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But we had a long discussion after that, and one of the cops that was involved with it, he did apologize, and he did admit to, racially profiling, but the cop who did it was also a black guy, So that made it a little bit more, what's that?
They can do it too.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And I think that in America, we've gotten so caught up with politics, and we've gotten so caught up with what we see on social media and whatever's trending in social media, that we forget that when we walk outside in the morning, I know for me, when I walk out my front porch, my front neighbor, lives in front of me, she's a white lady, and my next door neighbor, he's black guy, and, I say what's up to all of them. They treat me the same way. If you're robbing their house, I live in Texas and I have guns. Yeah, good luck. And I'm pretty sure they have my back as well. It's not I just don't see, I'm not gonna sit here and say I don't see color, even though that, scientifically or whatever is true, because I'm colorblind, literally. But I think that we have put so much time and energy and a belief that one person or someone we voted for can change the way all of us as a nation should or should not be able to think. We think because we hire or elect one president or one congressman that they're going to cure or solve all problems. It's like we're all adults. At what point in time in my life have I ever put my hands or my fate in, someone else that I don't even know? Essentially, that's what we're doing. We're getting a printout paper sheet of people who we're voting for, and we pick and choose, or maybe we read it, maybe we don't. Maybe we're like, this guy looks cute. Maybe he doesn't. I'm going to vote for this guy and I won't vote for that guy. But to put my fate in my hands as however the society may perceive, a stereotype of me, I can't hold that fate in the fate of a person who's elected. I take that upon myself. And if that means to, be a certain way or I think it's all boils down to self-worth. I know I'm not, what some in society may view me as. Regardless of color of my skin or anything like that, I'm not supposed to be here anyways, I'm not even supposed to be here. New York Times bestseller, and I graduated with a 1.7. So no matter, regardless of what you call me or what you tell me, it can't affect me. I'm already better than that. You know what I mean? So to put my fate into an elected official to change, the way society views people, I think the whole concept of that is kind of out of whack. We're all adults at the end of the day. You're telling me that I can't think about how I should feel about him or her or anything like that. I have to wait until some elected official sits and tells me, hey, don't be this way to these people. It starts with self. It all comes down to self at the end of the day. I'm a grown man. If I like you, I like you. If I don't, I don't. No official can tell me I have to because of their minority or anything like that or whatever. And we hear about this privilege and you put a color behind it. I don't believe that, because if that were the case, I wouldn't be sitting here today, and you wouldn't be going to this school today amongst all the different demographics and walks of life. So yeah.
Awesome. If we can get back to recruiting him to Georgia State. Look around this room. Everybody just look around at the mix. This is amazing.
Yeah.
The culture, the environment we're living in right now, but look at us come together and we can all talk about something in an adult way.
Yeah.
And be mature about it, and hopefully all of us go away holding our heads a little higher and stop being little children. But yeah, welcome to Georgia State.
Yeah.
And before I forget, for the Mountain Man, 10th Mountain Man, and yourself, do you know General Ken Keene, Lieutenant General Ken Keene? Okay, he used to be Colonel. Now he's retired 3-star General recently, but he was 75th, the 11th, 75th Regiment Commander. So I don't know if you knew his name or not. But he's at Emory, so it's how we go full circle. He's at Emory now, but he's going to be speaking at Georgia State here on Thursday for our Veterans Ceremony. But Rangers lead the way.
All the way.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Avani. My father is also a disabled veteran. And if it's any consolation, he didn't even graduate high school, and he now has a PhD as a clinical psychologist. So it's never too late to go back.
Wow.
But my question is, as a survivor of depression and suicidal tendencies, do you feel like that's behind you, or does your depression come in waves? And if it does, what do you do when it flares back up to quell those thoughts?
Yeah, I would say it's suppressed, and it It's been on and off, I guess, prior to when I started to realize this is like 6 months ago when I became sober. Like, it didn't happen because I went to rehab or anything like that. I just woke up one day and I was like, you know what? I'm not applying myself the way I think I should be. So I put it down for a little bit and I promised myself, and I promised my son was born on my birthday. I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna drink, anymore. Try to be a little bit more productive. And I found out that a lot of those suicidal and crazy thoughts that I had was, I guess stemmed from alcohol, They call it spirits for a reason because it does affect your spirit, And that's essentially what it did. And I put that down and things started to change. And I realized that, like I said, everything is a book. If you look at life is a lot like a book. And even if I do have a hard day, everything I do, I don't have a job and anything like that, but I'm not going to say I'm a poor guy. I'm pretty successful and I get a chance to talk to Wall Street people. I have no idea how I'm doing it, But I think that when I have a bad day, I look at what I've accomplished and that won't allow me to even, get back into that mindset. Even if it's, dealing with the military or anything like that, it's like, I accomplished a lot at a young age and why stop now? I think getting out of that rut was the hardest thing for me to do. And if I do ever feel like I'm falling back into that depressive, I guess, state of mind, I just remind myself of self-worth. And I think that it started back 6 months ago. I wrote down on a piece of paper 5 different things what I know I'm worth. And I kept it to myself, and every single day I, recited it, I put it in my wallet, and I knew that if I touched my wallet, something I always touch every single day, you put it in your pocket. I know that it would send like a synapsis or whatever back up to your brain because I wrote it and I saw it, then it's gonna subconsciously tell me my self-worth, regardless of whether I say it or not. So deep down inside, I always have that fallback on of my own self-worth, opposed to being out of the military and thinking, oh man, life sucks, I can't fit in, I'm depressed and I'm this. I stopped talking that way of negative about myself. I talk about the whole self-worth, Are you worth a penny with a hole in it or $100? It's up to you to decide. No one can put a monetary value on that. It's up to you if you wanted to, do that. But self-worth couldn't be anything, anything. Where do you want to be in 10 years, 5 years, 20 years? You got to think life is so short relatively to, you're speaking about 10 years. You have a guy who's done 13, 14 years and you look 21, dude. Like, life is short, man. And you've accomplished a lot. I'm pretty sure that when you started this whole thing, and you went through ups and downs and stuff like that too, but you had an end goal, throughout your career in the military. And just having that goal in life and self-worth is one of the things that I, I guess, harped on and picked up on. Just right, bless you.
Thank you.
Just putting that down. But I still have moments. I do still have moments, but like I said, this is where my heart wants to be, so it's impossible for me to quit now. Once you find and you hear that voice in your little, in your head or whatever, and you start to listen to it, you know that anything outside of that is impossible. So for me to fail or quit becomes the impossible, and only the goal is the achievable.
Time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Kristen. I'm an Air Force veteran, and I wanted to go a little bit off that question as what is your support? I know when I got out the Air Force, I had my dad to talk to because he's a Navy veteran, so he could understand everything I was telling him, but still to this day I can't connect to people who haven't been in the military. I just I feel like they can't understand me, I can't understand them. And also I just want to comment on how you like to relate things to cartoons.
Yeah.
And do you still relate things to cartoons?
Sometimes. Yeah, now it's Dora the Explorer. My son loves Dora, so I can relate a lot to that. Don't knock it. That's actually a pretty good show. If you want to learn Spanish or anything like that, it's pretty neat. But my support system, I would say, have you talked to the #1 person yet? Have you? Yourself?
Yes.
You've talked to yourself and you found that root cause of what the issue is? If you say you can't talk to people who are not veterans, right? Can you talk to yourself? Define that root cause? You can always go back to yourself. That's always a good fallback plan. You can talk to yourself, and write it down. And then you can start to, it becomes a game for me almost, essentially, where you can decipher, deciphering my life or deciphering your life. When you write down and say, what is the problem? Is it I can't relate to anyone? Or is it I fear this or I fear that? Like, I know what I fear, and I fear college, I know that. And I'm, openly willing to admit that. That's a fear for me. And I think finding why is it hard for me or you to relate to someone, finding that fear, then we can acknowledge it. And once we speak it out into existence, then that allows other people to see where we come from. And that's the connection point right there. Then that leads to future conversations and future understanding. It's kind of hard to understand an individual if they can't understand themselves first. So you have to be able to understand why it is a certain way you are, and then that way you can express it and then have a common ground to talk and drive on from. But don't ever put yourself out of the loop. I think seclusion and putting yourself out of the loop forcibly, it's detrimental. It leads to a situation I've been on the back porch with the Glock pistol. It leads to that. Like I said, that 60, 70,000 thoughts we have per day, and that definition of insanity of consistently doing the same thing over and over again, taking that one small step out of the box will change your life over the course of time. I look at it like sniping. A 1 mile per hour wind on a 100-yard shot for me, no effect. But on a mile-long shot, that 1 mile per hour wind that starts at my position will push my bullet off 100 feet at its goal, or its target, its initial target. So that small little change starts from where you are at. And then it, expands and expands and expands and expands over great distances and great periods of time, So just having that self-acknowledgement, like I said, it all comes down to self. Figure out what it is that makes you, or I'm just using, the way you are. Why is it hard to talk to someone? Or why is it a certain way? Or if it is so hard, you could always talk to, a veteran or someone of that sort. But trying something so different, as small as it may be, it will affect your life greatly over time. So I would propose that to you, is just give it a shot. No pun intended. Give it a shot. Give it a shot of just
Please join me
trying.
in thanking Nick.